The sun blazed down on the dusty construction site, casting long shadows of sweaty men mixing cement and stacking blocks. Among them was Jonathan, his once smooth palms now rough from lifting bricks, his back bent from days of hard labor, and his face speckled with dirt and dried sweat. But this morning, something was different. The noise of the shovels and the sound of hammers faded into the background as he stood on one knee, trembling not from fear, but from emotion. In his right hand was a tiny, cheap ring he had bought from a roadside vendor. It wasn't gold, it wasn't silver, just a thin piece of metal that shimmered faintly under the sun. "Cynthia," he said, his voice cracking as the workers stopped to watch. Some chuckled, others rolled their eyes. "Will you marry me?" Cynthia had just set down her old, stained cooler. The bright yellow apron she wore was splashed with red oil, and her hands held a big spoon dripping with bean. Her hair, though disheveled from the early morning hustle, framed her face like a crown. She stared at him, mouth open, frozen spoon still raised mid-air. Laughter erupted from the other workers. "Who'd they propose with pure water ring?" one shouted. "She goes slap-am," another howled. But Cynthia did something no one expected. She dropped the spoon and stretched out her left hand. "Yes," she said quietly. "I will." The whole site fell silent, then gasps, then chaos. Because right after she said yes, Jonathan reached into his pocket, pulled out a brand new iPhone, and dialed. "Johnson, bring the cars to the usual spot." "Cars?" Everyone froze. Minutes later, a convoy of black SUVs rolled onto the dusty construction grounds. Men in suits and sunglasses stepped out, bowed before Jonathan, and opened the door for him. Cynthia's mouth dropped open. "Jonathan, who are you?" she asked, trembling. He turned to her, gently holding her hand. "I'll explain everything." But who was Jonathan? And how did a poor bean seller like Cynthia become the center of such a mysterious, unbelievable moment? 1 month earlier, Jonathan Charles was not your average man. At just 34, he was the founder and CEO of Titan Cranes Nigeria, a company worth billions with contracts spread across the country. He had 3 homes in Lagos, a fleet of luxury cars, and employees who treated his name with reverence. But none of that brought him peace. Because no matter how much money he had, he couldn't find love. Real love. He had tried. Oh, he had tried. Lavish dates, private dinners in Dubai, weekend getaways to Paris. But each time, the women came with smiles and left with his money. The last one, Amanda, was the final straw. She had cried about needing emergency surgery for her mum. He gave her $50,000. She vanished. No calls, no goodbye, just gone. So Jonathan made a decision no one around him would ever understand. He would disappear, not forever, just long enough to find something real. To find a woman who would love a man in dirty clothes, not a man with a fancy last name. The next morning, before anyone in his company could stop him, Jonathan packed a small bag, put on old jeans, a worn-out t-shirt, and caught a taxi to a countryside construction site. No drivers, no convoy, no fancy suits, just him. He joined the labor crew the next day under a false name. The first few days were brutal. He had no idea how to hold a trowel. He spilled cement. He broke blocks. The site supervisor shouted at him like a child. "Are you mad? Is that how to lay blocks? Are you a man at all?" But Jonathan swallowed every insult. Because for once, he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't trying to win contracts. He was on a mission to find one woman who would love him without knowing what he was worth. And that's when he met her, Cynthia. Every morning, like clockwork, she'd arrive balancing her cooler on her hip. She always wore the same blue t-shirt and skirt, with her bright yellow apron tied loosely around her waist. Her hair often looked like she hadn't brushed it properly, but her smile? That smile could melt stress from a tired soul. "Good morning, sir," she'd say, offering him a plate of hot beans with soft bread on the side. "Why do you call me sir?" he once asked, curious. "Because you act different," she said with a shrug. "Even in your dirty clothes, I can tell you're a gentleman." That answer stuck with him. He started watching her more closely. She treated everyone with kindness, even the rude ones. And when one worker tried to harass her, she told him off with strength and calmness that made Jonathan smile. She wasn't just kind, she was strong. They started talking more. He found out she had graduated from a university with a degree in accounting, but couldn't find a job. Why? He asked. No one to recommend me, she said, wiping her face with a napkin. I've sent over 70 applications. I got tired. My mum is sick, and this is the only way I can feed us. He couldn't believe it. A graduate, selling beans? And yet, she never complained. She never begged. One day, he told her he didn't have money to buy food. She smiled and gave him a plate anyway. Pay when you can, she said. That night, Jonathan cried. He cried because for the first time in years, someone gave without expecting anything back. But time was running out. His company was beginning to suffer without him. His managers were calling every day. He knew he couldn't stay much longer. He had to return. But he couldn't leave without doing one thing first. He had to shoot his shot. He wanted her, forever. So he took the last cash he had in his pocket, bought a ring that would embarrass most rich men, and waited for the morning. Now, here he was, on one knee at the dusty construction site, his colleagues laughing at him, the sun beating down on his neck, and Cynthia saying yes. But Cynthia didn't know the truth. Not yet. And as the SUV door closed behind her and the car pulled away from the site, her heart raced. Who was this man really? And what kind of life was she walking into? The hum of the SUV's engine was the only sound between them. Cynthia sat stiffly in the back seat, her hands clasped in her lap, eyes darting nervously around the plush interior. The leather seats felt too soft. The air conditioning was too crisp. The way the men in black suits bowed at Jonathan still replayed in her mind. Who are you? She turned to him slowly. Jonathan, please. What's going on? He looked at her, his smile gentle. Cynthia, everything I told you about myself wasn't false. I just didn't tell you everything. You mean, you're not a construction worker? I was, he said, nodding. For a while, but only because I needed to meet someone like you. Cynthia's heart thumped. Someone like me? He took a deep breath, then continued. I'm Jonathan Charles, CEO of Titan Cranes, Nigeria. Cynthia blinked. That name. It sounded familiar. No, it was more than familiar. It was famous. It was the name on billboard cranes she passed every time she went to Lagos to buy food in bulk. She had even once joked to a friend that if she ever met him, she would ask him for a job. She stared at Jonathan as if seeing him for the first time. The rough stubble, the calloused hands, the tattered jeans, none of it matched the image she had in her mind of a billionaire. I don't understand, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Why would someone like you pretend to be poor? He smiled again, but this time it was sad. Because being rich didn't help me find real love. Every woman I met wanted the same thing. My money. My lifestyle. No one saw me. Until you. She didn't speak. Couldn't. Everything was moving too fast. The convoy drove through the gates of an enormous mansion on the outskirts of Lagos. The compound was massive-like, something out of a movie. Palm trees lined the driveway, and a marble fountain sparkled under the golden sunlight. Cynthia's mouth dropped open as she saw a team of staff standing at attention near the front steps. The moment the SUV stopped, the door was opened, and more men bowed again. Cynthia clutched Jonathan's arm. Please. I don't know how to act here. He turned to her, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. You don't have to act, he whispered. Just be you. That's who I fell in love with. Inside, the mansion was even more overwhelming. Polished floors, golden chandeliers, and walls lined with fine art. She could barely walk straight. One of the maids approached her with a tray of drinks, but Cynthia stepped back awkwardly, unsure if she was allowed to even touch anything. Jonathan noticed and quickly dismissed the maid. He walked her to the living room, an elegant space with floor-to-ceiling window stand sat beside her. Cynthia, he said, I didn't bring you here to impress you. I brought you here because I want to be honest. You have every right to walk away now if this isn't what you want. But if you'll still have me, I want to spend the rest of my life with you." She looked down at her oil-stained apron, still wrapped around her waist. Her fingers trembled. "I'm just a beans seller. And I'm just a man," he said, "who finally found someone that sees beyond wealth and titles." Tears welled up in her eyes. She wasn't used to this being seen, truly seen. "Okay," she said softly, "but you'll have to be patient with me. I've waited my whole life for someone like you," he said. "Take all the time you need." The following weeks were like a dream for Cynthia, but not all dreams are easy. At first, the staff didn't know how to treat her. Some assumed she was just another visitor. Others whispered when she walked past. One maid had even scoffed behind her back, saying, "How can this market girl end up here?" But Cynthia didn't react. She remembered where she came from. She took it slow. She started helping in the kitchen not because she had to, but because it made her feel grounded. She refused to change her food overnight and still loved the same local beans she used to sell. Jonathan supported her every step of the way. One day, he asked her, "What do you really want to do, Cynthia, now that you don't have to sell beans anymore?" She paused. "I want to work," she said. "I want to use my degree. I studied accounting, remember?" That same week, he brought her into his company, but not as a trophy fiancée. She started from the bottom, as an assistant in the finance department. Some of the staff rolled their eyes, assuming she got the job through favoritism. But Cynthia didn't care. She worked harder than anyone else, came early, stayed late, took no shortcuts. Her manager, a woman named Mrs. Bassey, was strict and didn't make it easy for her. But Cynthia kept going. "I know you're testing me," she told Mrs. Bassey one day, "and I don't mind. I just want to prove I belong here." Weeks turned into months. Slowly, people started to respect her not because she was Jonathan's woman, but because she earned it. One evening, after a particularly long meeting, Jonathan met her outside the boardroom. "How was it?" he asked. She smiled tiredly. "I think I earned my first bit of respect today." Bassey actually said, "Good job." He chuckled and hugged her. "I'm proud of you." As they stood in the hallway, the boardroom lights flickering off behind them, Cynthia whispered something she'd never said out loud before. "I love you, Jonathan." He smiled. "Say it again." "I love you." But just as he leaned in to kiss her, his phone rang. He checked it. His face darkened. Cynthia looked worried. "What is it?" He hesitated. "Something's wrong at the company. A board member just called for an emergency vote. They think I've gone soft, and someone is trying to take over." Cynthia's eyes widened. "What do we do?" He looked at her, serious. "We fight, but not just with money, with truth." Cynthia followed Jonathan into his private office, her heart racing. She had only just found her place in his world, and now it felt like it was slipping away. "They're calling for a vote?" she asked. "Yes," Jonathan said, pulling up the email. "One of the board members, Mr. Okoye, claims I've abandoned the company, that I'm distracted, weak." Cynthia's chest tightened. She knew some board members had never liked her. A few believed Jonathan's disappearance to the construction site was because of her, and now someone was using it to attack him. "What can we do?" she whispered. Jonathan looked at her, his eyes steady. "I need to show them the truth. I haven't abandoned this company. I've been watching everything. And now, I have the perfect person to expose the fraud happening behind closed doors." "Who?" Cynthia asked. "You." "Me?" He smiled. "You've been in the finance department for months. You told me about those irregular transfers last week. Remember?" She nodded slowly. "You were the only one who caught it," he said. "And that gives us power. If we can trace those fake invoices back to Okoye's people, we can stop this vote and clean house." Cynthia hesitated. "But I'm just an assistant." "You're an accountant," he corrected her. "A smart one, and I trust you." That night, they worked side by side in the home office. Cynthia poured through spreadsheets and flagged every suspicious transaction. The deeper they went, the uglier it got. Embezzled funds, ghost vendors, and slush accounts tied to Okoye's relatives. By morning, they had a complete report. At the board meeting later that day, Okoye stood tall, smiling smugly. "With all due respect, Jonathan, the company needs someone present and focused." "I agree," Jonathan said calmly, "which is why I brought someone who is." He turned. Cynthia walked into the boardroom, wearing a clean, fitted suit. Confident, poised. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "please turn to page 1 of the report. I believe you'll find something enlightening." As Cynthia broke down the evidence with clarity and confidence, the room fell into stunned silence. Okoye's face turned pale. Some members gasped. Jonathan watched, pride swelling in his chest. By the end of the presentation, the chairman cleared his throat. "Mr. Okoye," he said sternly, "you'll need to step down pending investigation." Cynthia looked at Jonathan, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You just saved my company," he whispered. "No," she said with a soft smile. "We saved it together." But just as relief settled in, a security guard rushed into the room. "Sir, you need to see this. There's been an accident at one of your construction sites." Jonathan's smile vanished. "Which site?" "The one where we met," the guard replied. Cynthia gasped. Jonathan and Cynthia rushed to the SUV. The ride to the countryside site was tense. Cynthia clutched her seatbelt tightly, her heart pounding with fear. The place that brought them together, where he knelt, in dirt to propose, was now the center of a disaster. As they approached, thick, black smoke curled into the sky. Sirens wailed in the distance. A large section of the site had collapsed. Panic spread like wildfire as injured workers were carried into ambulances. Cynthia's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God!" Jonathan jumped out before the SUV fully stopped, sprinting toward the chaos. The same site supervisor who once yelled at him for breaking bricks ran up to him, visibly shaken. "We don't know what happened, sir. Something gave way underground. The scaffolding crashed. 2 men are still trapped." Cynthia's knees buckled, but she held on to the car door. "Anyone hurt badly?" The man nodded grimly. "One man's leg is crushed. The other. We can't find him yet." Jonathan didn't wait. He ordered the crew to begin a manual search while engineers assessed the structure. Cynthia joined the medics, helping to calm the injured, using her scarf to stop a man's bleeding shoulder. Just then, a foreman ran up. "Sir, we found him. It's Musa. He's alive, but barely." Musa, the kind worker who used to tease Jonathan about being too soft for construction work, the one who always shared jokes during break time. Jonathan rushed to the collapsed area. Musa lay half-covered in rubble, groaning. "Don't move," Jonathan said, kneeling beside him. "We're getting you out." It took nearly 30 minutes, but they pulled Musa out alive. His first words were whispered, "You, really the ogre." Jonathan laughed through his tears. "Yes, but don't worry about that now. You'll be fine." Later, as the site was cleared and the injured taken to safety, Cynthia sat beside Jonathan on a bench. Her clothes were dirty, her eyes red. "That could have been you," she whispered. "I know." He turned to her. "This site, it changed my life. It gave me you. But it's also shown me that real love isn't about perfect timing or perfect places. It's about staying." She looked into his eyes. "I'm not going anywhere." He leaned in, kissed her forehead gently, and sighed. "I think it's time," he said. "Time for what?" "To rebuild. Not just this site, but our life." Cynthia nodded slowly. "Then, let's start together." But just as they stood to leave, a worker ran toward them holding a newspaper. "Sir, you need to see this." Jonathan took it, brows furrowing as he scanned the front page. His photo, Cynthia's photo, and a headline that read, "Billionaire CEO proposes to Bean's seller insiders claim it's all a stunt." Cynthia's breath caught, her eyes filled with tears. Jonathan's jaw clenched. This wasn't over. Jonathan stared at the newspaper in silence. The bold headline screamed at him. "Billionaire CEO proposes to Bean's seller insiders claim it's all a stunt." Cynthia's photo was circled in red. Below it were cruel comments calling her a gold digger, a lucky village girl, and worse. Cynthia stepped back, her voice shaking. "Is this what people think of me?" He folded the paper slowly. "They don't matter." "But they do," she said, eyes brimming. "They're judging me, not for who I am, but for who I was. For selling beans, for being poor." He took her hands gently. "Cynthia, listen to me. None of them were there when you gave me food without asking for a kobo. None of them saw you clean wounds at the site today. They don't know your heart. But I do." Tears slid down her cheeks. "I just wanted to live a quiet life. Now I feel like I'm on display." Jonathan wrapped his arms around her. "Then, let's show them the truth." The next morning, Cynthia stood on the stage of the company's annual press conference beside Jonathan. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice didn't waver. "My name is Cynthia. I sold beans because I couldn't find work, not because I lacked value. I never imagined I'd fall in love with a man in torn jeans at a construction site. I didn't know he was a billionaire. I just saw a kind man who helped others even when he had nothing to give." She paused, scanning the quiet crowd of reporters. "People are mocking me for accepting his proposal without knowing who he was. But what they don't understand is I didn't fall in love with a CEO. I fell in love with a man who treated me with respect." The room was silent. Jonathan stepped forward. "Everything you've read is true, except the part about it being a stunt. This woman saved me. She reminded me who I was when I had lost myself in wealth and noise." The applause started slow, then swelled into a standing ovation. That day changed everything. Cynthia officially became the company's new chief financial controller. Her journey from beans seller to boardroom earned her admiration across the country. TV interviews, magazine cover 7 young women in the village began writing to her for advice. A year later, in a breathtaking ceremony attended by leaders and celebrities, Cynthia and Jonathan were married. Her gown sparkled under the sun, but her eyes never left the man who once carried cement by her roadside cooler. Months passed, and the couple welcomed a baby boy. They named him David, symbol of grace and unexpected greatness. On their 5-year anniversary, Cynthia stood before a crowd once more. "I judge no one by clothes or status," she said. "And today I stand here not because I married rich, but because I married right." The audience stood and clapped. But Jonathan? He just smiled. Because he had found what billions couldn't buy. What is your view about this story? Where are you watching from? If you enjoy this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.